In Italy, a young boy of African descent is stomped to death by a group of friends because he dared to intervene and interrupt them while they were bullying a friend of his. This case was one case that almost caused a movement in Italy because minorities were sick and tired of losing their own to hate crimes. So they came out in their numbers to demand justice for Willy. Have you subscribed to my channel yet? Please take a second to subscribe to my channel, then we can go into the details of this case. Willy Montero Duarte was born in 1999 in the lovely home of parents Lucia and Amado in Rome, Italy. Lucia and Amado were originally from the African island country of Cape Verde, but they migrated to Italy in the early years of their marriage. Willy was a very gentle young man. He grew up in the town of Pagliano and attended school in Fiuggi. Those who knew him described him as a sunny, silent, good boy who never hurt anybody, even not a fly. He was also said to be very hardworking and upstanding. Amongst other things, Willy loved cooking. At 21, he was determined to work hard by any means necessary to become a world-renowned cook. But for the time being, he worked as an assistant cook at the restaurant in Hotel degli Amici di Atena, which was about 10 minutes drive from Colleferro. He took his job quite seriously and was really good at cooking. Apart from cooking, Willy also really loved football. He was actually good at the sport itself, and his favorite sport club was AS Roma. His friend said he was a true fan for the Serie A club, and at the back of his mind, he was going to play for the club sometime in the future. However, Willy's big dreams and ambitions would be cut short even before he turned 22 years old. On this particular day in September of 2020, it was a weekend, and Willy, who hadn't had time with his friends since he had a very busy schedule, would make plans to meet. His work schedule was tight, so that means that they would only get together after he had gotten off work. Now, after finishing a work shift over the weekend at Hotel degli Amici di Atena, he returned home to change and went to meet his friends. He told his family that he would be back soon as he went out of the door. No one knew at that point that they will never see him alive again. Now, while hanging out with his friends in the early hours of September the 6th, 2020, a friend of Willy's called Samuel Sincerelli had this minor altercation with this group of guys who were also out hanging out. The altercation was over something really trivial. Even though it's not exactly clear what it was that they were not on the same page about, the argument was said to be senseless. It really wasn't that serious, but these guys would start manhandling Willy's friend Samuel. Clearly, the poor guy was outnumbered, so Willy, being the nice guy who did not like conflict or confrontation, walked up to these guys to plead on behalf of his friend. That singular move turned out to be a very bad idea, as these guys turned on Willy and they started beating him for interfering and interrupting them. Before you know what was happening, more members of the crew arrived and things escalated. They beat him to a pulp. It's not like people didn't see what was happening. People were there and they were watching, but they were too afraid to get involved. And that meant that no one intervened to save Willy. Willy's friends who were there were also watching. They witnessed the savage beating that their friend was given. According to one of them, Willy's attackers were jumping on him when he was lying helpless on the ground. Just imagine 4 to 5 healthy guys jumping on one person laying down helpless. They were kicking and stomping on him, and no single person dared to stop them. I guess maybe for the fear of meeting the same fate. The only thing they did was to call the police. And while the police were yet to arrive, these people continued to beat the crap out of him until they were satisfied, then they left. Willy's friends stayed with him up until the time help arrived, but it was too late as Willy had passed on. He had succumbed to his injuries. He had been deleted from the face of the earth for coming to the rescue of a friend who was being beaten up for an issue that he had absolutely nothing to do with. A fight that was triggered by a trivial issue. This crime was very annoying and very difficult to accept. Not that crimes are acceptable, but the way this particular one went down was so senseless, it was so sickening. It was said that the two major actors in this crime were not even at the same of the argument from the start. Like I mentioned earlier on, another part of the crew came to join up later. They arrived and saw their friends arguing with some dude, and they just jumped in and started to attack this dude physically without even asking questions. Now the police arrived and carried Willy's body to the morgue. Then they proceeded to inform his family and give them this sad news. You can imagine how devastated they were when they got the news. How painful must it have been for a loved one to go out with friends and never to return back home in one piece? Plus, the manner by which Willy passed away, how he was beaten and stomped upon, was just too much to bear for his family. An autopsy was carried out on Willy's body, and it revealed that he had passed away as a result of polytrauma. This simply means that he had multiple traumatic injuries to his chest, to his abdomen, and to his neck, which then led to a cardiac arrest. It corresponds to eyewitness accounts of him being jumped on and kicked from all angles and stomped. Now, when news got around the country about this case, the incident caused an outrage in Italy, with a torrent of rage directed at those accused of Willy's demise. At the time, people believed the crime was racially motivated since the perpetrators were all white and Willy was, a black guy. There was serious pressure on the authorities to bring these guys responsible for this despicable and senseless act to book, and the police began to do their work tirelessly. Now, since what had happened was witnessed by a lot of people, it didn't take long for the local police to make arrests. 4 guys were arrested, including 2 brothers, Marco Bianchi and Gabriele Bianchi. These 2 were said to be the ringleaders, and then 23-year-old Francisco Bellaggia and 22-year-old Mario Pincarelli were also taken into custody as well. So let's talk about the Bianchi brothers a bit. The Bianchi brothers, who were 26 and 24 years old respectively, were said to be obsessed with family and mixed martial arts. Marco Bianchi and his brother Gabriel were said to have been, terrorizing the area for years with fights and violence of all kinds. Marco, the younger of the 2, who was 24 years old, was an MMA champion who was popularly called Maldito. So you can imagine a simple, small-statured guy like Willy being attacked by an MMA fighter. And not just one, but about 4 to 5 of them, hefty men, attacking him. Come on. He didn't even stand a chance at all. He had no chance. The Bianchi brothers both operated a fruit stand, but their lifestyles did not exactly match those of people who sold fruit. They were known to show off a life of luxury on their social media pages, driving around in luxurious cars and wearing designer clothing and designer watches and all of that. It was in fact rumored that they were affiliated and they felt invincible as they flaunted their wealth and their violent attitudes because of their affiliation. These brothers had a trail of violence following them. They were said to have attacked a security officer at one point and then hit another traffic cop who was just trying to carry out his duties at another point. A man from the area said that he knew of the brothers, and for 2 years they've been fighting and beating people the same way they did Willy. He said that people were well aware of them, but they were also scared of them. Now, following the attack on Willy, the Bianchi brothers and Mario Pincarelli were arrested and placed in Rome's Ribera prison. The 4th suspect, Francisco Bellaggia, was put under house arrest. And now, while they waited for their trial, the brothers claimed that they didn't touch Willy at all. They in fact blatantly lied, even though they were seen by multiple eyewitnesses beating and jumping on the poor guy. They still denied that they did this. This claim infuriated the public even the more, and as soon as the charges facing them were upped from manslaughter to murder, the 3 men began to receive threats inside the Ribera prison when they were being held. Speak of the hunter being hunted. These guys had dealt with people thinking that they were untouchable and that they were invincible, and now they were afraid for their lives. These 3 will require solitary confinement in a protected wing of the prison over fears that they will be attacked by other inmates. I thought that they were untouchable and invincible. All of a sudden, they were now scared. Yeah, right. They wanted to be protected, but they never gave Willy the chance. Meanwhile, while the Bianchi brothers were being held in prison, the Italian police uncovered a drugs network spanning Velletri, Lariano, and Athena, and other places, and a lot of people were arrested. The Bianchi brothers were part of that network too. That means that apart from Willy's case, they will also be facing prosecution for their involvement in this network of illegal activities. At least this explains where their flashy lifestyle comes from. Let's leave it at that for the Bianchi brothers and let's focus on Willy, because today's case is entirely about Willy. The Bianchi brother was just to give you a background of the people that did this to him. Willy's burial took place after a funeral mass was held at the sports field of the Pagliano province of Frosinone, while mourners lined the road to applaud the funeral procession. Hundreds of mourners showed up to pay their respect to Willy, alongside the then Italian Prime Minister, the President of the Lazio region, and the Minister of the Interior. A delegation from AS Roma, who Willy dreamt of one day playing for, also attended the funeral. Led by club legend Bruno Conti and young players from the Giallorossi Academy, the club announced it would dedicate its school anti-bullying program to the memory of Willy throughout the 2020-2021 season. At the end of the funeral, the then Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte embraced Willy's mother and father, Lucia and Armando, and his sister Milena. He said, quote, "Italy is with you. It loves you," end quote. Conte goes on to write in a Facebook post that the attack sets a bad precedent for others who may want to act as good Samaritans. Here is the statement that he wrote. "The tragedy that struck the family of Willy Montero Duarte yesterday struck me deeply. It left me shocked. A boy who had recently crossed the thresholds of 20 years, studied and worked, lived his passions, emotions. He cultivated his dreams and was probably exposed to the many uncertainties that concern young people intent on building their own future of personal and professional life. Suddenly, a deaf and unmotivated violence fell onto him. We are all close to his family, to his community of Pagliano, to all those who love and appreciated him. I convey these feelings to his parents, to his sister, even in the awareness that it's difficult to fully understand the anguish caused by such acute and painful suffering. The judiciary is conducting investigations and justice will definitely take its course. We trust that we will soon arrive at a certain and severe condemnations. How will we react in the meantime? What measures will we take? Will we tell our kids to turn their heads away, not to intervene to sedate disagreements or try to protect weaker friends when in obvious difficulties? I don't think this can be the answer or path to follow. We must rather multiply our efforts in every location and in every context to ensure that our children grow up in the court of respect for the person and escape the myth of violence. End quote. I believe this statement that was put out was very well thought out, because at the time, the minorities in Italy were very angry and they wanted the attack on minorities to stop already. So in October of 2020, Italy's President Sergio Mattarella conferred a posthumous gold medal for civil valor on Willy Montero Duarte in recognition of his exceptional selfless favor and extraordinary determination in defense of a friend in difficulty, in an attempt to, favor a peaceful solution to the heated discussion that followed Willy's demise. Willy's family was devastated. You could clearly see the pain through their eyes when his life was cut short, and my heart goes out to their family. I don't know how they're doing now. I pray that time heals their hearts. This crime is one of the most senseless I have ever come across. The poor guy didn't do anything to warrant being attacked by this man at all. When the Bianchi brothers were arraigned in court, these guys actually turned on each other. Or let me say the brothers, Marco and Gabriel, turned on Francisco. Marco said, quote, "I only gave Willy a push and a kick in the side. He fell but immediately got up. Then I went away. I didn't realize that something serious had happened to him," end quote. Then he says Francisco is not telling the truth. He said his accomplice should take responsibility for what he did to Willy. He, however, did admit to hitting Willy's friend Samuel on the chest, and for that, he did apologize. He said he was sorry. His brother Gabriel said Francisco Belaggia was the one who, in fact, hit Willy and kicked him in the face, while Willy was still on the ground. According to him, he wanted to tell the truth from the very beginning, but his lawyer had advised him against that and asked him to wait. And he was pained that while they were in jail, Francisco was only under house arrest. The brothers also added that they were out drinking and they saw a brawl and they intervened to break it up. That they didn't attack nobody, they didn't attack Willy as it was being claimed. But Francisco Belaggia, on the other hand, denies everything and he accuses Marco Bianchi as the person who continued hitting Willy. Quote, I never hit Willy. Marco hit him several times with a lot of punches, end quote. So much snitching for these guys was going on. They called themselves tough guy, but they were snitching anyhow. Anyways, at the end of the day, pending the trial on Willy's case, the Bianchi brothers were sentenced to, I think, 5 years and 4 months in jail for their part in the illegal substance distribution network I talked about earlier, while they waited for the trial and the outcome of Willy's case. Now, fast forward to 2 years after the attack, Marco and Gabriel Bianchi were on the 4th of July last year sentenced to life in prison for the murder of 21-year-old Willy Montero Duarte, while the 2 other accomplices of the Bianchi brothers, Mario Piccarelli and Francesco Bellaggia, received sentences of 21 years and 23 years in jail respectively for their role in what had happened to Willy. The verdict was greeted by applause in the courtroom in Frosinone as the Bianchi brothers yelled and cursed at officers taking them away. It took a while, but Willy did get the justice that he deserved, you know. It's really sad what they did to Willy, you know. He only wanted to diffuse the situation and stop a friend from being beaten and bullied. He didn't want no trouble. He wasn't even a fighter. And for that, this man took his life. Well, life in prison is good enough for me. Let them rot in jail for being so heartless. That's pretty much it for today's case, guys. Consider subscribing if you haven't subscribed yet. And remember to give this video a thumbs up as well. Keep it there with me and I will see you in the next video.